Hello gorgeous people and welcome to Sparkle Tart. I'm Kate Palmer and today I cannot wait to show you how I store and organise all of my Prima Confections watercolours. At the end of last year I fell over, hurt my knee and got stuck in a lazy boy chair for about 2 months. I needed to look for something to do that was still crafty and creative that would keep me busy, so I started swatching my watercolours and swatching and swatching and swatching. Apparently I've got a lot of watercolours. But when I started swatching my Prima colours, I hit a bit of a snag. Now, for those who aren't familiar with Prima watercolours, little sets of 12, and they come in these cute little tins. Now, they're colour coordinated for a specific theme, like terrain, sort of warm autumny colours, ocean, shimmering lights, shimmer colours. Each of the tins has a neat little finger pull on the back in case you want to hold the tin while you're painting, which is not really my preference. And they all have individually wrapped little watercolours and a colour swatching card inside. Now, each of the little watercolours has a number so that you know what you're using, but the names don't really relate to anything other than sort of a promotional kind of thing. So they don't really correspond to a Daniel Smith phthalo blue or something like that. So the first thing I do is unwrap all my colours and then use a little microperm pen to write the colour number, which is only printed on one side or the bottom, on all sides or at least 3 sides. And that way you can kind of see it from a few more places if you've got these in the little palette. Once I've got all of my colours numbered, I go and fill in the colour chart because that way I know exactly what colours were in that tin all together. Now, at the time of filming, there are 12 tins of Prima watercolours, and I have 11 of these. But just so that you know, the colours in the complexion set are actually in the other sets. So if you've got all other 11 colour sets, you've already got all the colours in the complexion set. They're duplicates. So if you own the majority of the Prima colour sets, don't go and buy complexion like I did because you already have those colours. Now, when you're filling in your little colour swatch card, you'll find there's a great variety on the papers. Some of them in Prima's earlier colour swatch charts were shiny paper, which didn't take the colour very well. Others are sort of more plainish paper. So once you've got all of these filled in, you can choose to put all of your colours back in the little Prima palette. But this is where it started irritating me. The colour I wanted was always in another palette. And when I was trying to use them together, it made it really difficult swapping between palettes constantly and a real mess on my desk. And as you know, it's really easy for me to make a mess on my desk. So I needed to find a solution. I did a whole lot of Googling and didn't find a lot of things that could hold over 120 colours, which is what I have. So I found a really cool suggestion from Nina Marie on YouTube, and she was talking about a Magello Airtight watercolour palette. Now, I couldn't find exactly the same one that she'd used, but I did find that the company has produced a new model. And it's a little bit bigger. So how perfect is that? So let me show you how I organise my Prima watercolours. I've got 10 whole sets in this Martin's Magello watercolour palette. And then how I organise the colours, because that was a whole lot trickier. It took about a month's worth of research and colour swatching. And when I say colour swatching, I mean intense, crazy girl colour swatching. Let me show you my samples. Now, when I started swatching my Prima colours, even though I had them on all of the little set cards, when I started swatching them, it was driving me crazy because every time I wanted to go and grab one colour, for example, when doing the greys together, they were all in different boxes. So I started trying to organise things. I started with these, and it didn't really help because I couldn't see everything together. So then I started swatching onto little pieces of cardstock. And I started with something like this, and on the back of pieces of paper at my desk, and then on more pieces of card, and more pieces of card, and the back, because sometimes the colour didn't look the same on a smooth surface as it did on a rough surface, or as a small swatch compared to with a larger swatch. So I had to do it again, and again, and again, and again, and again. because those Prima colours can look extraordinarily different depending on the paper if it's watercolor card or plain card, if it's rough watercolor card or smooth watercolor card, and definitely they vary depending on how thickly you've applied the paint. So it took me quite a bit of work to try and figure out where all the colours fit together. And I swatched and swatched and swatched and swatched and swatched. Now originally I had them in order of just sort of lightest to darkest reds, oranges, yellows. But I was finding that when I wanted to use them and pick between the colours, that wasn't enough, because sometimes I'd grabbed one colour next to the other and one was a cool yellow, one was a warm yellow, and it was making things not look quite as amazing as they could have. So I found a fantastic site online that talked about warm colours and cool colours, and I started following its guidelines about warm reds and red violets and warm blues and blue greens, to separate my Prima colours into a bunch of colour categories. Now it took a while and it was a little bit challenging because not all of the categories have a Prima colour, and some of those Prima colours, especially the vintage pastels, because they've kind of got a grey or an undertone of their own, they didn't really fit into specific colour categories, but I've done my best. So the site used Winsor Newton and Daniel Smith as a guide. So I swatched out all my Winsor Newton and Daniel Smith colours into the different colour categories. So blacks, greys, whites, browns, earth reds, earth orange, earth yellow. You can see how different the variety is there, even just in the earth tones. Yellow, yellow, orange, yes, they're different. Orange, orange, red, red, again. So much variety in just a red colour. Deep red, red violets. Some of these are my favourites. Violets, violet blues, green blues, blue greens. Again, quite different and distinct. Green, yellow, green, green, yellow. And this is what I used as the basis for my separating the colours in my Prima palette. So you can see why I needed all those swatches, because I really needed a good sense of where it fit in those different colour categories. And to do that, I needed to see how it looked when it was dark, when it was a lighter wash, and make sure I had the true colour so I was putting it in the right spot. Now don't worry, I have got a colour chart that I have made for you. It's on my blog and there's a link in the description so that you can download it for yourself, even so that you can disagree with me about which category a colour should be in if you like, because I'm not an expert in categorising colours. I'm just a really persistent fan, a fan of colour. So I have really, I hope, done the best job I can here in sorting out these colours. As you can see, I've done many colour swatches to make sure I have it as correct as I can. Now I've also listed the colour categories I've used and the colours I've put in each category on my blog, so that you can go and have a look for yourself and see what I've done. Now, once I had all of this complete, and this is what I've created. I think the colour order is almost spot on, but let me know what you think below this video. It took a while, but I think this is Prima Watercolor Confection Colour Heaven. And this is the palette that I bought to store all of my Prima Watercolor Confections in. It is called the Martin Universal Design Watercolor Palette, and it says Magello on the front. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And when you purchase this palette, it has two different sections. So on the top is a really cute little removable tray, and on the bottom are some watercolor wells. When you open it up, both of the top and the bottom sections are very firmly held in place, and they've got a little bit of glue tape underneath there that holds them in. Now this is the little removable palette. Take that out just so that it's easier to work with. Now what I have done is grabbed a set of fine needle nose tweezers, popped them under one of the corners of the bottom palette, and very carefully lifted out the tray. Now, when I did this for the first time, it took a little bit of prying, so just get one corner up and then very carefully peel it back so that you don't break the tray, because you might want to use that later. and then remove the double-sided tape that's held it in place. Once this is done, you are ready to go because you want that large rectangular section on the bottom to hold your Prima watercolors. Now, this tray is plastic, so it is not magnetic. So you're going to have to do one of two things. One, accept that those watercolors are going to roam around a little bit if you tip the tray upside down or tip the palette upside down, or do what I've done and use some Ranger Wonder tape to stick the little palettes in. Now, I've used the large 1/2-inch tape. I would highly recommend using a smaller one just so that it holds them in, but it's so that they're easier to move. Now, I've measured the bottom and I can fit 7 rows with 18 watercolors per row. So I'm just going with a Copic marker and marking the edges of each side of the little palette base so I can put the tape in the right spot. Now, I just said before, use a thinner tape than I have. That will allow you to move the watercolors a little bit more easily if you decide to change the color order. Now, the tape that I've used, which is the thicker one, will still let me do that. I just have to pry them up with my little tweezers again. So go and add that tape, 7 strips. Use a Copic blender just to remove those little marks because you don't need them anymore. So as you can see, I've got 7 rows, and all I now have to do is go and pop in my Prima watercolor half pans. Now, this will hold over 120, yes, over 120 colors. In fact, when you go and have a look, you will find that you can fit in 7 rows, 18 pans, 126 half pans. So I've got 10 Prima Color Confections sets in here with room for an extra 6 pans if I buy any more. And, I probably will. Now, what I've done on the last few rows is just leave a bit of that backing tape still in there. The colors are still held firmly in place, but it just means that it's a bit easier to take them out. You can do this with yours too if you had the same size or width tape that I did. Now, as you can see, I've got a few little gaps, but I'm okay with that. It just leaves me room for extras. Now, what I've done is I've created a nice little watercolor color chart. And yes, you can print this out. I've made it available on my blog. Now, I say that really quickly, kind of like it was simple, but in reality, this is the part that took me months of color swatching. I had to do all those color swatches to create this palette order for my pans and that color chart, which has all of them in order based on color category. It was truly a mammoth task, and you can see the effort that went in to get that done. But I really think it's been worth it because this is the end result and I am loving it. Now, once I finish with the swatching, I have gone and added all of my half pans to my large palette. I have printed my color chart on this Arches watercolor paper, and this is smooth 185 GSM, which went through my printer just fine. This, I cannot believe how much easier it was to use. I wanted to do a color wheel with warm and cool colors. That took me about 5 minutes, I kid you not, because I could go and find every single thing exactly where I needed it, exactly where I wanted it. It was so easy, and I knew if it was warm or cool, so I knew exactly how it was going to look. It was beautiful. Now, once I'm finished on camera here, the one thing I will do is go and chop all of these little pieces into strips and then glue them exactly where the colors are, because that was the only problem that I found. Because the piece of watercolor cardstock was not as long as the actual palette, because it's bigger than a piece of A4 card, it wasn't the same length. So I'm going to cut all of these into little strips and then glue each strip exactly on top of where the colors are. And that will make it even easier to find things, because I'll just follow the strip downwards and I'll know right where the color is. So that's the only thing different that I'm going to do. But as you can see, it's broken up into families, color categories, warm grays, cool grays, yellow browns, red violets, blue violets, greens, that whole gamut that I just talked about before. And honestly, I really wish I'd done this sooner, or I wish someone else had made a color chart breaking it up sooner, because it would have been much easier, saved me months worth of work. But hopefully I can save you the same amount of time and energy by having done this. So I hope this is useful for more people than just me, but I've enjoyed doing it anyway. Thanks for watching. Bye.